We are glad to welcome you to the Lucas History Channel. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more stories like this. Enjoy your viewing. My name is Mark Johnson, and I thought I understood the depth of human connections, the trust and love that bind two people together. That illusion shattered one Saturday night at the Parkers' house, where my wife, Beth, and I attended a party that would change our lives forever. It began innocently enough, as most tragedies do. We arrived at the Parkers', a well-kept suburban home alive with laughter and music, and mingled with the familiar crowd. Beth, with her dazzling smile and effortless charm, moved among the guests like sunlight filtering through a canopy. For a while, I allowed myself to relax, drink in hand, enjoying the warmth of shared company. Then, the evening took an unexpected turn. It wasn't until the party was winding down that Joe Parker, our affable host, unveiled the night's special event. A bowl filled with house keys was presented to the room. The men were invited to pick a set, and the idea was that they'd spend the night with the woman whose key they drew. My stomach turned as the implications set in. I caught Beth's gaze across the room. She wasn't shocked, she wasn't even surprised. There was something else in her eyes, something I hadn't seen before. Anticipation. Excitement. I stormed over and pulled her aside into the kitchen. "You knew about this?" I hissed. Her smirk confirmed my worst fear. "Yes. And you didn't think to tell me?" "I didn't because I knew you'd overreact." Her voice was calm, as if this were an inconvenience, not a betrayal. She pleaded her case. "It's just one night, Mark. Something different. Something exciting. I need this." But what about what I needed? What about our 10 years of marriage, our 3 children, the life we'd built together? It wasn't just one night. It was a wrecking ball aimed at the foundation of everything I thought we stood for. "I'm leaving," I announced, louder than I intended. The room hushed, but I didn't care. "Beth, you're coming with me, or you're staying here and never coming home." A dozen curious eyes bore into us, but it was the look on Beth's face that truly gutted me. Anger. Embarrassment. Indignation. She muttered a quick apology to the group before grabbing her purse and following me out to the car. The ride home was a battlefield of silence. Beth sat with her arms crossed, her eyes fixed on the darkened scenery outside, as though I was the villain who had ruined her perfect night. "You could have just picked a key," she said finally, her tone accusatory. I slammed on the brakes and pulled the car over. "Let me make this clear," I said, turning to her. "If you want this so badly, I'll take you back to that house right now. But understand this, if you go back, you're choosing them over me, over us. There's no coming back from that." Beth didn't answer, but her expression spoke volumes. When we reached home, she stormed inside without another word, slamming the door to our bedroom behind her. The next morning, I woke to find Beth gone. There was no note, no explanation. Just an empty bed and an ache in my chest that grew heavier as the minutes ticked by. I tried calling her, but she didn't answer. Hours later, my phone rang. It was Ted Mason, a friend of the Parkers. His words hit me like a freight train. Beth had returned to the party. She had dropped her key back into the bowl, joining in the sordid game she had begged me to accept. I didn't stick around to hear the rest. I hung up and packed a bag, stuffing it with whatever I could grab, a few days' worth of clothes, my laptop, my wedding ring. I smashed the ring flat with a hammer, leaving it on Beth's pillow alongside our torn marriage certificate. I drove aimlessly for hours, the night stretching into an endless blur of taillights and regrets. My thoughts spiraled with the weight of betrayal. The woman I had loved, the mother of my children, had chosen a fleeting thrill over the sanctity of our life together. Eventually, I checked into a dingy motel in a neighboring town. It wasn't much, but it offered the anonymity I craved. As I sat on the creaking bed, staring at the darkened screen of my phone, a voicemail notification appeared. It was Beth. Her message was chillingly casual. She spoke of her night with another man, how it was just sex, how she would make it up to me when she returned. The audacity, the cavalier disregard for everything we had shared, was a dagger to my soul. I deleted the message without finishing it. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to salvage. My marriage was over, and I was alone with the wreckage. But endings are just beginnings in disguise, aren't they? Somewhere deep within, amid the pain and the betrayal, a spark of resolve began to flicker. I didn't know how or when, but I would rise from this. For my children, for myself. Beth had thrown her lot in with strangers at a party, but I would show her the cost of turning her back on the man who had given her everything. By the time dawn broke over the desolate parking lot of the motel, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to wallow. Beth had torn apart our life together, and she would face the consequences. My children deserved stability, and I'd fight tooth and nail to provide it. I checked out of the motel and stopped by a diner. It was the kind of place with scuffed linoleum floors, a few scattered booths, and the persistent smell of bacon grease. I slid into a booth by the window and ordered coffee, though I doubted I could stomach it. As I stirred in some creamer, my phone buzzed again. Beth. Another voicemail. I debated deleting it outright but pressed play. Mark, please, just listen, she began, her voice cracking. I know you're angry, but it wasn't what you think. Brian was gentle, Anne. I slammed my fist on the table, burning a glance from the waitress across the room. I lowered my voice and whispered harshly to myself, gentle. As if that makes it better. Beth's voice continued, oblivious to my fury. It was just a release, Mark. I needed it, and now that I've had it, we can move on. Please come home so we can talk. I love you. I've always loved you. She didn't understand. Her actions had set fire to everything we'd built, leaving nothing but ash. Love? That wasn't love. That was selfishness wrapped in denial. I left the diner without touching my meal and called the toughest divorce attorney in town. Sandra Matthews was a name I'd heard in whispers, the kind of lawyer you hired when you wanted to win, no matter the cost. Mr. Johnson, she greeted me after I explained my situation, if what you're telling me is true, this will be a straightforward case. Adultery is clear grounds for divorce in Mississippi, and we'll leverage it to secure custody of your children. Do you have any evidence? Her question gave me pause. Evidence. The word felt cold, transactional. But I knew I had what I needed, Beth's voicemails. I have recordings, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil within. Good, Sandra replied, her tone crisp and professional. Bring them to my office tomorrow. We'll start building your case. For the first time since the party, I felt a flicker of control, a sense that I could shape the outcome of this nightmare. That evening, I visited my kids at my mom's house. Natalie, Emma, and little Mark Jr. ran to me with open arms, their laughter filling the air like a balm for my wounded heart. Where's Mommy? Natalie asked, her wide eyes filled with innocent curiosity. Mommy's busy, sweetheart, I replied, forcing a smile. You'll see her soon. It was a lie, of course. The truth was too heavy for their young minds to bear. We spent the evening playing board games and watching cartoons. For a few precious hours, I was able to forget the chaos swirling around me. As I kissed them goodnight, I made a silent vow. No matter what happened, I would protect them from the fallout of Beth's betrayal. The next morning, I arrived at Sandra's office, armed with voicemails and a determination I hadn't felt in days. Her office was a fortress of order, every file neatly stacked, every detail meticulously arranged. She listened intently as I played the recordings, her expression remaining unreadable. These are damning, she said finally, leaning back in her chair. Your wife has openly admitted to the affair, which will work in our favor. But be prepared, she may try to paint you as controlling or unsupportive. We'll need to counter any narrative she spins. I nodded, though the thought of Beth twisting the truth made my stomach churn. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with another call from Beth. This time, I answered. "Mark, thank God," she said, relief flooding her voice. "We need to talk. Can I come over?" "Why, Beth?" "So you can tell me more about how gentle Brian was." Her breath hitched. "That's not fair. I made a mistake, but it doesn't erase everything we've been through. I love you, Mark. I love our family. Then why did you destroy it?" I demanded, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "I didn't destroy it," she cried. "I was trying to find something I lost. Don't you understand? I felt invisible, like I was just existing. Brian saw me. He made me feel alive again." Her words were a knife, each one driving deeper. "And what about me, Beth? Did I not make you feel alive? Did our life together mean nothing?" "It's not that simple," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It is to me," I said coldly. "You've made your choice, and now I'm making mine. Expect to hear from my lawyer." I hung up before she could respond. As the days turned into weeks, the divorce proceedings began. Beth's tears and pleas did little to sway me. I was resolute, fueled by a determination to protect my children and rebuild my life. But the road ahead was anything but smooth. Beth wasn't going down without a fight, and the twists yet to come would test my strength in ways I never imagined. The divorce process was like walking through a minefield, every step uncertain, every moment filled with the potential for disaster. Sandra worked tirelessly, but Beth countered every move with a kind of desperation I hadn't expected. She painted herself as a misunderstood woman, a loving mother who had made a mistake in a moment of weakness. The court hearings were grueling. Beth's attorney leaned hard into the narrative that I was too rigid, too controlling, that my refusal to adapt had left her feeling stifled. They even dredged up old arguments from years ago, disputes I had long forgotten but now saw paraded as evidence of my supposed shortcomings. Sandra, however, was relentless. She presented the voicemails, playing them in court. Beth's voice, filled with breathy descriptions of her night with Brian, echoed through the room like a haunting melody. I avoided looking at her as it played, focusing instead on the judge's reaction, a mixture of disbelief and discomfort. It was clear to everyone in that courtroom that Beth's actions weren't just a lapse in judgment. They were a deliberate choice, one she tried to rationalize but couldn't undo. One evening, a few weeks into the proceedings, I was sitting in my temporary apartment, poring over documents Sandra had given me, when there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Beth standing there, her face pale, her eyes rimmed with red. "Mark, please," she began, her voice trembling. "Can we talk?" Against my better judgment, I let her in. She stood in the middle of the small living room, looking out of place among the sparse furniture and cardboard boxes. "I know I've hurt you," she said, wringing her hands. "But this isn't who we are. We've been through so much together. Can't we find a way back?" Her words were laced with sincerity, but they felt hollow, like an echo in an empty room. "You think we can just go back?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. "Beth, you didn't just break my heart, you shattered my trust. Every time I look at you, I hear your voice, describing how gentle Brian was. Do you understand what that does to me?" She flinched as though I'd struck her, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I was lost," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't know how to tell you how I was feeling. I thought one night would fix everything." "One night?" I echoed, laughing bitterly. "Beth, that one night tore our lives apart. You didn't just cheat on me. You humiliated me. You risked our family for what? A thrill? Attention?" She sobbed, sinking into the nearest chair. "I don't want to lose you, Mark. I don't want to lose the kids. Her plea hit me like a wave, threatening to drag me under. But I couldn't let it. I had to stay strong, for myself, for our children. You already have, I said quietly. You lost us the moment you chose him over us. In the weeks that followed, Beth's behavior grew increasingly erratic. She would show up unannounced at the kids' school, at my apartment, even at Sandra's office. Each time, her desperation was more evident, her words more frantic. I'll do anything, she pleaded during one of her visits to my apartment. We can go to counseling, therapy, whatever you want. Just don't take the kids from me. It wasn't about punishment. It wasn't about revenge. It was about ensuring the kids had a stable, loving home, one free from the chaos Beth had introduced into our lives. Then, the unexpected happened. One day, I received an anonymous envelope in the mail. Inside was a stack of photographs. They showed Beth at the Parkers' party, long before the infamous Key Bowl came out. In one, she stood close to Joe Parker, her hand resting lightly on his arm, her smile suggestive. In another, she and Brian were laughing, their heads tilted toward each other as if sharing a secret. But it was the final photo that took my breath away. It showed Beth in a dimly lit hallway, her arms wrapped around Joe, her lips pressed to his. I stared at the photos, my mind racing. Joe. Not Brian. Was the night at the Parkers not her first betrayal but merely the one she hadn't been able to hide? Had she and Joe been carrying on an affair under my nose all along? The photos raised more questions than they answered. Who had sent them? Why now? And most importantly, how deep did Beth's betrayal go? I showed the photos to Sandra the next day. She studied them carefully, her sharp eyes narrowing. These could be game changers, she said. If we can prove this wasn't a one-time mistake, but a pattern of infidelity, it strengthens your case significantly. But who sent them? I asked, still grappling with the implications. Sandra shrugged. Does it matter? What matters is the truth they reveal. The next court hearing was a turning point. Sandra introduced the photos as evidence, arguing that Beth's actions were not the result of a fleeting lapse in judgment but part of a deeper pattern of deceit. Beth's lawyer tried to downplay the significance, but the judge wasn't convinced. Beth's composure cracked on the stand. When confronted with the photos, she broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Her lawyer quickly requested a recess, but the damage was done. For the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. The truth was coming to light, and with it, the possibility of a new beginning, for me, for my children. But as the hearing ended and I walked out of the courthouse, I couldn't shake the feeling that the battle was far from over. Beth had been hiding secrets for years, and I couldn't help but wonder what other shadows from the past might still be waiting to emerge. The revelation of the photos had shifted the balance in my favor, but it also left me with more questions than answers. Who had sent them, and why? The envelope bore no return address, and Sandra's private investigator couldn't trace it. I tried to focus on the immediate task at hand, winning custody of my children. But the mystery gnawed at me, a shadow lurking at the edge of my thoughts. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was pulling strings behind the scenes, someone who knew far more than they should. One night, after tucking the kids in at my mom's house, I decided to confront Beth directly about the photos. She had been calling me incessantly since the court hearing, her messages alternating between tearful apologies and heated accusations. This time, I answered. Who took those photos, Beth? I asked without preamble. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I don't know, she said finally, her voice small. I didn't even know they existed until the hearing. Don't lie to me, I snapped. You and Joe, how long was it going on? Beth hesitated, and in that hesitation, I found my answer. It wasn't serious, she said at last. It was just a few times. Before the party, before Brian. It didn't mean anything. Her words ignited a fire within me. You didn't think that was worth mentioning? You let me believe the party was the first time you betrayed me. I was ashamed, Mark, she said, her voice cracking. I didn't want to lose you. You lost me the moment you made that choice, I said coldly. But you didn't even have the decency to admit it. You let me fight this battle blind. Beth started crying, but I didn't stay on the line to hear it. I hung up, seething with anger and disgust. A week later, another envelope arrived in the mail. This time, it contained a single note typed in block letters. Look deeper. The truth is closer than you think. My hands trembled as I read the cryptic message. Was this a warning? A clue? Or some cruel game designed to push me further into despair? I took the note to Sandra. She examined it with the same clinical detachment she applied to everything. It's vague, but it could be significant, she said. I'll have my investigator look into it. Meanwhile, the court battle intensified. Beth's lawyer pushed back hard, questioning my ability to be a single father while painting Beth as a devoted mother who had made a mistake but deserved a second chance. Beth played the part well. In court, she was contrite, tearful, her every word dripping with regret. But outside the courtroom, she was relentless, hounding me with calls and showing up unannounced, pleading for reconciliation. It was during one of these uninvited visits that the first crack in her facade appeared. Why are you doing this, Mark? She demanded, standing on my doorstep. Can't you see we're stronger together? I'm doing this because I can't trust you, I said firmly. You destroyed that trust, and now you're facing the consequences. Her eyes flashed with something that looked like desperation, or fear. You think you know everything, but you don't. There's more to this than you realize. What's that supposed to mean? I asked, narrowing my eyes. Beth hesitated, biting her lip. For a moment, it seemed like she was about to tell me something significant. But then she shook her head. Forget it, she said. You wouldn't understand. And with that, she walked away, leaving me with yet another unanswered question. The next day, Sandra's investigator uncovered a lead. The photos had been taken by someone who lived near the Parkers' house. A neighbor, tired of the constant noise and late-night parties, had begun documenting the comings and goings of the guests, intending to file a complaint with the HOA. The photos had been sent anonymously after the neighbor recognized me from a news article about the court case. But that still didn't explain the note. The truth finally began to unravel when I received a third envelope. This one contained another note, along with a USB drive. The note read, "You need to know everything." I plugged the drive into my laptop, half expecting it to be some kind of prank. Instead, I found a series of video files. They were recordings from hidden cameras placed around the Parkers' house. I watched in horror as the footage revealed not only Beth's affair with Joe but also a web of deceit that extended far beyond what I had imagined. The Parkers' parties were more than just casual swaps, they were orchestrated, manipulative, and deeply predatory. Joe and Lisa had been using their influence to coerce and manipulate their guests, exploiting vulnerabilities for their own twisted gain. And Beth, my wife, had been complicit. In one video, she was seen introducing a new couple to the Parkers, laughing as she reassured them that the parties were just for fun. In another, she was in deep conversation with Joe, discussing how to loosen up reluctant guests. My world crumbled as the magnitude of her betrayal became clear. Beth hadn't just cheated on me. She had been an active participant in something far darker. I brought the evidence to Sandra the next day. Her reaction was uncharacteristically grim. "This changes everything," she said. "Not just for your case but for everyone involved. If this gets out, the Parkers could face serious legal repercussions, and Beth could go down with them." I nodded, the weight of the discovery pressing heavily on my shoulders. The truth was finally out, but it was far more devastating than I could have imagined. And it wasn't over yet. The weight of the USB drive in my pocket was nothing compared to the burden it carried. The evidence it contained didn't just expose Beth's betrayals, it revealed a network of manipulation that went far beyond our broken marriage. Joe and Lisa Parker had turned their home into a hub of coercion and deceit, and Beth had been a willing participant. The question now was how to proceed. Sandra and I agreed that the evidence was too explosive to sit on. If we used it strategically, it could not only secure custody of my children but also bring down the Parkers and expose the rot at the heart of their so-called gatherings. The next court hearing was a pivotal moment. Sandra, with her unflinching poise, introduced the USB drive as evidence. She played one of the videos, a clip of Beth laughing with Joe as they discussed which guests were ripe for the party's twisted games. Gasps filled the courtroom as the recording played, the judge's expression growing darker with each passing second. Beth's lawyer tried to object, but Sandra was prepared. "Your Honor," she said firmly, "this evidence demonstrates a pattern of deceit and predatory behavior. My client's priority is the safety and well-being of his children, and it is clear that Mrs. Johnson's involvement in these activities poses a direct threat to that." Beth sat frozen in her chair, her face pale and drawn. For the first time, she looked truly defeated. Outside the courtroom, I expected Beth to lash out, to demand explanations or hurl accusations. Instead, she approached me with tears streaming down her face. "Mark," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I didn't mean for it to get this far. I didn't realize how deep I'd gotten until it was too late." "Too late?" I said, my tone icy. "You didn't just destroy our marriage, Beth. You risked everything, our kids, your integrity, for what? Parties? Attention? Power?" She shook her head, sobbing. "I was lost. I thought I could be part of something exciting, something different. But it consumed me." "You didn't think about what it would cost," I replied. "And now you're paying the price." She collapsed onto a nearby bench, her body racked with sobs. For a fleeting moment, I felt pity for her. But it was quickly drowned out by the pain she had caused. The court's decision came swiftly after the evidence was presented. The judge awarded me full custody of the children, citing Beth's behavior and involvement in the Parkers' activities as evidence of her unfitness as a parent. She was granted supervised visitation rights but nothing more. Beth tried to argue, but the judge's ruling was final. For me, the victory was bittersweet. I had won the battle, but it felt like I had lost so much more. A few weeks later, I received a final message from Beth. It was a letter, handwritten, delivered in an envelope with no return address. "Mark. I've lost everything, and I know it's my fault. I don't expect forgiveness, and I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I loved you once, with everything I had. I still do, in my own broken way. Please take care of the kids and give them the life I can't. Tell them I love them. Beth." I stared at the letter for a long time, unsure how to feel. It was the closest thing to an apology she had ever given, but it wasn't enough to erase what she had done. I tucked it away in a drawer, unsure if I'd ever show it to the children. Life began to settle into a new rhythm. I moved into a house closer to my mom's, where the kids could have a stable, loving environment. They asked about their mother often, and I did my best to answer without revealing too much. "She made some mistakes, I'd say, but she loves you very much. The Parkers weren't so lucky." The videos were turned over to the authorities, and their world unraveled. Joe and Lisa faced charges for their role in the manipulative parties, and their once thriving social circle crumbled under the weight of scandal. One evening, as I tucked my youngest, Mark Jr., into bed, he looked up at me with wide, innocent eyes. "Daddy," he said, "are we going to be okay?" I smiled, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. "Yes, buddy," I said. "We're going to be just fine." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. The scars of Beth's betrayal would never fully heal, but they had taught me something valuable. Strength isn't about avoiding pain, it's about rising above it. And for the sake of my children, I would rise as high as I needed to. The past was a shadow, but the future was mine to shape. Thank you for watching to the end. Write in the comments what you liked and what you would like to see next.